Good evening, friends, family, parents, teachers, and alumni. My name is Joey Busey, and I'm a member of the Citizen Speaker Series founding team. I'd like to thank you all for virtually attending the second event of the Citizen Speaker Series, featuring Speaker Jeff Abella, the CEO and co-founder of Mocha Origins.
My name is Alex Hamill. Tonight we'll take a deep dive into Jeff's personal story of social entrepreneurship and how his company, Mocha Origins, balances profit and impact. We will start with the fireside chat moderated by Cole Cherian, and then move to an audience Q&A with Sumant Sharma.
This event would not have been possible without the time, energy, and wisdom of our mentor and advisor, Mr. Michael Reardon, and the support of our families, Mr. Silp and the Malvern leadership team, Billy Mullray and the Malvern TV studio, Mr. Lou Calamecco and the Malvern alumni team, and also, last but not least, the support of our Malvern brothers.
Jeff loves coffee, chocolate, and giving back. In 2007, he moved to Cameroon and has been focusing on international business development ever since. His passion and drive for social entrepreneurship has led him to establish humanitarian projects in Mexico, Africa, and India. He also co-founded a tropical food farm and a cocoa farm in Cameroon that works alongside his Bean the Bar factory in Honesdale, Pennsylvania.
Jeff is the managing director at the Himalayan Institute Cameroon and the president of the Himalayan Institute Humanitarian. Jeff is also a member of the FedEx Entrepreneur Advisory Board. His company, Mocha Origins, prides themselves on empowering farmers and restoring the environment.
He also loves to give back to the community by speaking to many different audiences, including students. He's spoken to many different people across the country, including Yale University. We are super excited to have him here tonight. He also received the FedEx Small Business Grant in 2019 and was recently profiled in the New York Times. We are super excited to welcome Jeff to Malvern Prep.
With that being said, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Cole Cherian, who's the chairman of Citizen.
Thanks, Joe and Alex. Jeff, thanks for joining us tonight. We're really excited to have you here to share your Citizen moment and story, and we're grateful that we were able to make it happen amidst the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks, Cole. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So, when did you have your first sip of coffee, Jeff? Let's start there.
Oh, the first sip. You can't forget that. So this is a funny story. I had been now living in Cameroon already for a few years and working with coffee farmers, and was really into coffee as a crop, as a food tree, and was really into the agronomics of coffee. And so here we are, my wife and I were living in a restored coffee cooperative, which is our home, overlooking a beautiful coffee nursery, and I'm working hard to spearhead inroads with farmers and market linkage with coffee as the main vehicle for this idea. And my wife always joked, how can you be so obsessive over something you actually don't drink? And so it was that moment she made coffee for us, and I don't know if it was the euphoria of being in such a beautiful space overlooking the trees that the beans came from, or if I just really liked it, but there was no turning back. That was my first sip of coffee.
Yeah, well, that's a much more glamorous first sip of coffee than anyone really I know could say. So in 2007, you moved from living full-time in Wisconsin to working in Pennsylvania and Cameroon. What prompted that decision, and what was that transition like?
Absolutely. So in Wisconsin, I worked for my family's business. I'm actually an audio engineer from Wisconsin, and loved music, loved audio, and my dad's company was a small business working with companies to create marketing and branding for these companies. And as much as I love the technical side of that, and I learned a lot of small business skills and entrepreneurial skills, communication skills, I kind of felt a lack of mission or purpose, and I wanted to redefine my life around a point of impact or mission. And so I did naturally what anyone would do. I quit my job and moved to Cameroon, Africa, to start a cocoa farm and chocolate factory in Pennsylvania. And when my wife and I did that, it was to work for an amazing not-for-profit. And chocolate and coffee at that point were not really the motives. It was a pursuit of social entrepreneurship. And for this not-for-profit, we spent the last 13 years building libraries, health centers and vocational training programs. And I'm really proud to say that those programs are still running strong, and they're positioned in coffee and cocoa growing regions. And so as we're launching these humanitarian programs, we're living and working with cocoa and coffee farmers. And that started in 2007 and really fueled our passion for agriculture and coffee and cocoa.
Awesome. At Citizen, we believe that the most powerful way to share stories of positive social impact is to focus around what we call the citizen moment. This is the point in one's life at which he or she decides to become dedicated to making a change. So Jeff, what's your citizen moment?
My citizen moment came after asking a lot of questions and working in these coffee growing and cocoa growing communities and seeing firsthand the challenges that coffee and cocoa farmers face. There's this cycle of poverty that often farmers are trapped in. The cocoa and coffee sector is kind of built around, at least in this part of Cameroon, low quality, low compensation for beans so that consumers can have access to low cost, cheap chocolate. And this is a defective supply chain. And I started wondering, how can two foods, coffee and chocolate, which billions around the world eat every day, not afford to feed the farmers who grow the beans? How could a chocolate bar really cost $1 when so much energy and love and time goes into producing the beans that they're made from? And I boldly believe that cocoa and coffee and just ethical supply chains in general that foster profit at every level can be a way to really break through poverty cycles.
Yeah.
And so my citizen moment was when I realized I wanted to start a chocolate and coffee company to help break the cycle of poverty for these farmers in Cameroon.
So this idea for Mocha Origins was just the start. What happened after that?
Then the fun began. So here we were. We knew the problems that we were facing, and I had a really great local management team. So Cameroonian board of directors, advisors, friends. You know, we've been there now for, at that point, about 10 years. So we were really entrenched in the community and used a lot of our community members to help do proper needs assessment, making sure we were looking at problems correctly and helping co-create potential solutions. So building Mocha is kind of two parts. One is our chocolate factory and coffee roastery in Pennsylvania, and then the other is our cocoa farm in Cameroon, where we use as a training and demonstration farm. And so the chocolate making side was something that it was a little bit more accessible as far as tapping knowledge that's already exists here, especially coffee roasting. You can educate yourself pretty quickly, research this. There's a lot of experts willing to share their technical expertise. On the cocoa farming side, if it wasn't for a decade of previous experience in this community and agricultural background that my business partner brought, in fact, sidebar, we had started in Cameroon, our health centers that we run actually have a laboratory where we manufacture herbal medicine. So we started hiring cocoa and coffee farmers to grow the medicinal herbs. And so we were already working with agriculture for a while. We then took this project to South India in partnership with the Dalai Lama's Tibetan refugee settlements, and then in central Mexico, where I spent 3 years working with coffee farmers to create more sustainable food systems. And so if none of that had happened, starting a cocoa farm in rural Cameroon would have been really challenging. But the land was made available, the social infrastructure, I call it, was in place. We had the friends, the team was ready to work. I had agronomists and agricultural technicians lined up. We had research institutions that specialize in tropical food crops. And so building the cocoa farm, we had a barren tract of land donated to this project. We needed land that had at least a good amount of humidity to grow cocoa and river access so we could tap it for irrigation year-round. But we really had to build many other things from the ground up. We had to dig a well that we could pull clean drinking water from and use for irrigation. We had to travel to India to buy the pumps and piping and all these different things for our electrical systems that didn't exist and our water systems. We had to build our own road network throughout our farm and water tanks even. And so, this is I think like the ultimate startup story. Here we are, day one of launch. We're in tents with a drone mapping the land, and so years later now we have a nice home on this farm, a place where we can nurse 50,000 seedlings. We have water and solar electric. But yeah, it took a long time to really put all those pieces into play, and I just love that it took, I think, the mission behind it to keep us fueled through the really hard times and challenges that it took to launch Mocha Origins Farm. On the coffee and chocolate side, so we landed and built this project in Honesdale, Pennsylvania, on the campus of the Himalayan Institute's not-for-profit, where we had already been living and working out of as our base. And it's a beautiful restored dairy barn that for the past, we launched in 2017, our chocolate factories for the past 4 years have converted into a food-grade, organic, certified chocolate factory. And we could research a lot about chocolate, how to make chocolate, and how to roast coffee. But one of the challenging things is that chocolate, kind of by design, there's not a whole lot of equipment out there to make small batches of chocolate. Chocolate is a huge commercial commodity that 7 companies make about 99% of the world's chocolate. So to find equipment that's suited and affordable for a startup's budget to make small batches was challenging. We even had to build some of our own equipment. And I thought it'd be fun to understand that a bit more by looking at chocolate and seeing what that really is.
I'm excited to learn.
So, chocolate is something we consume every day, but what is it really? And, I get a lot of joy from this, but chocolate is a fruit. It grows on a tree. So if it's good quality chocolate, I consider it a health food. And it's this beautiful crop called cacao or cocoa. You can use them interchangeably. And we had these fresh cocoa fruits flown in for this presentation because I wanted to show you that cocoa is just like an apple or an orange, something that a farmer puts years and years worth of love into growing and time and energy and money into producing before there's any value. For example, when we plant our cocoa trees, we're planting them from seeds, and it takes about 4 years before that tree is producing anything of value. So one thing that Mocha Origins Farm teaches is intercropping. In addition to growing cocoa, which is going to take 4 years to derive any value, let's also grow bananas and plantain, which within 9 to 10 months we can harvest and sell in the local markets, while the shade from those trees protect the sapling of the cocoa. Then we also grow mango and avocado and papaya and other fruit trees to add value to that farm. So we're trying to create an ecosystem that is restoring the environment, healthy for the cocoa trees, but also economically one that's going to help sustain farmers immediately. So, Cocoa 101, Chocolate 101. This is a cocoa pod. I usually do this with a machete, but I didn't want to bring that into the school, so I'm going to do my best here to break this open. Okay. So, here's a fresh cocoa fruit. This was harvested about a week ago, so you can still see it's got a lot of life to it. And if you could smell this, it's really amazing. So, it smells like plums or fresh fruit. This cob that grows in the middle of the cocoa pod has these little seeds on there. And these seeds are called cocoa beans. And they're contained in this fruit. It's a mucilage that coats it, a very sugary mucilage fruit. We'll call it a pulp, a little bit more of a pleasant word. And the pulp is really important because the pulp, after harvesting and breaking this open, farmers need that pulp because step 2 is fermentation. So from this point, the bean can kind of go in 2 directions. One is it can go into fermentation and ultimately chocolate making. The other is it can go into the ground and germinate into a new tree. So on Mocha Origins farm, for example, 100% of the cocoa pods that we're now harvesting were regerminating and growing more cocoa trees. We seek to grow a tree for every product sold, and this year we're hitting 100,000 trees planted. So we're really proud of that, and each tree is grown from a seed. The chocolate making step, though, you take this mass of cocoa fruit, cocoa beans covered in this fruit, and you put it into fermentation boxes, and acid is created, mainly acetic acid. And this acetic acid, over the course of about 4 to 7 days, it depends on many factors, like the climate that you're in and the quality of the bean, it needs to ferment. So this fruit will ultimately drain away and then will be dried, and you'll be left with these dried cocoa beans. And you can hear them. They're, a dried cocoa bean, and this is what's shipped to us back at our factory. And so when we crush this open and you break it apart, you have 2 things. You have the shell and you have the cocoa nibs. The cocoa nibs are crunchy, they start to taste like chocolate, and that's the first and main ingredient in our chocolate. So from there we put the cocoa nibs into our stone grinders. Now, stone grinders we were able to buy. We have ones that can do about 500 chocolate bars worth at a time. But the crushing and separation, we couldn't afford that machine. So we have a mechanical engineer named Steve who built one for us. And we actually won a Innovator of the Year award. But for other entrepreneurs out there listening, you have to get innovative, and you have to love and embrace that creative process. And so building a winnowing machine was part of our process. We can do about 1 pound a minute. In fact, now, because we've successfully done that, we have some commercial companies sending us the expensive machines that we could never afford just for us to test and give them feedback. So I kind of love how that's evolved. But it all came from, passion, dedication, and innovation. So cocoa nibs now go into these stone grinders. These are basically big bowls that spin, and granite stone rollers pummel that chocolate and liquefy this nib, which actually is about 50% cocoa butter inside. 50% is cocoa butter. The other 50% is cocoa powder. So when all of this starts to get mashed up in these stone grinders, it turns into beautiful flowing liquid chocolate. We add sugar, and that's it. That's our chocolate right there. Sometimes we add extra cocoa butter if we want to make it a little bit more creamy. And then we have, this is a 30-pound block of chocolate. And it's untempered. You can see the cocoa butter crystals actually separating from the chocolate solids. And it's almost like art. It smells so good, by the way. The block of chocolate we let rest for 2 to 4 weeks. It lets the flavors continue to develop and stabilize. And then we take that block of chocolate, melt it back down, and then we do a tempering process. Tempering is where we take untempered chocolate. Chocolate has cocoa in it. Cocoa has a fat called cocoa butter, and fats have crystals. The crystal in chocolate at this stage was a beta-1 crystal. We need to temper that, which means using agitation, stirring, and heat to take that from a beta-1 to a beta-5. And at that beta-5 stage, it's going to be nice and shiny, and you can listen. You'll have a nice snap. And that's what we're looking for in tempered chocolate. It's kind of the science part of it, and it's a lot of fun. The next step then is to take our bars, and we still hand wrap everything, and they go out to our consumers. We took it a step further, and I like to challenge all entrepreneurs who are thinking about their product and go-to-market strategies to look at your product as a communication tool. And so inside of our packaging, we ended up telling the story of the farmers. For example, single origin chocolate. This chocolate made from cocoa beans that were grown was made from cocoa beans that were grown in Ghana. They were grown by this cooperative, and you can read the farmer's story right here. You can even snap a code and go to the website to read more about them. And in some instances, you can then even travel with me to explore these cocoa farms, volunteer on the farms, and yeah, have a real cultural immersion. But that's the chocolate making process in a nutshell. Pun intended.
Jeff, that's amazing. I learned a ton. Got a little hungry, not going to lie, but
I'll keep that here for you.
I'll wait until after the event's over to dig in. But when you were explaining that process, it became evident to me that this is a really cross-disciplinary project starting Mocha Origins. So can you explain a bit about building the team?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you become fascinated by an idea and you execute, you very quickly, especially a business, and the clock starts ticking, especially if you have maybe some venture capital or you're on your own budget. But anyway, you have to very quickly ramp up and develop skill sets in many different areas. And so, surrounding yourself with people who are willing or you're able to afford that have the technical expertise to lend them is really important. So, never underestimate your team. What I found, though, until you have cash flow and you can afford a team, you need to dig in. You need to become a agronomist. You need to research everything you can and become a food technologist and a coffee roaster. And what's kind of fun and challenging is that there's other companies that are already established and working at full steam. They have huge teams, they have big budgets, they have already market momentum and brand awareness. Well, you need to develop that kind of all at once and, and compete with them. And so, yeah, a lot of challenges that come at once, and a good team is definitely, absolutely the greatest asset a startup can access. Yeah.
So in a social entrepreneurship class I took last year at Malvern, we talked a lot about this idea of the edge effect, which is the creativity that's spurred when two diverse groups are connected. How is Mocha Origins an example of this edge effect?
That's a really great question and a great way to frame it. I think the ultimate example for us is cocoa farmers are typically not chocolate makers, and chocolate makers are typically not cocoa farmers. There's a huge disconnect. And that disconnect has created a devastating supply chain that keeps farmers from earning a living wage income for what cocoa buyers and chocolate makers are buying beans at a low commodity price. And so what I love when we brought Mocha to life was that, for this instance, us as a cocoa farmer, we're also the chocolate maker. And we're going to be able to, for example, grow cocoa and ferment it in such a way, and we're going to be testing the fermentation to know that, wow, we're fermenting this in such a way that the quality of this bean is better, and that Mocha or other specialty chocolate makers will pay more for that. So we could say to our farming partners, keep fermenting for 7 days, turning every 2 days, and make sure you get your beans humidity level to a certain temperature. Moisture level rather, and the bean flavor is going to taste like this. It's fine flavored cocoa or specialty grade at that point, and we can pay you 50 to 80, or in the instance of our last Cameroon bar, 300% more than the stock exchange price for cocoa. So the edge effect, bringing two different disciplines together, I think for the growth of a company, there's so many advantages. And then you have different teams looking and catching kind of different blind spots. And so for this instance, I was bringing the cocoa farmer expertise to the chocolate maker, and really bringing in that, no, cocoa farmers are making chocolate. They're doing the fermentation and deriving the bean quality, which is the first most important step for a chocolate maker to source high quality ingredients. And then, within Mocha in our chocolate factory, same kind of thing. So having, me, I have a developmental background, so building health centers and libraries and looking at things from an impact point of view. Well, others on my team look at the, financial performance of the company, and balancing those is really important.
So this actually leads into one of my questions. We've seen historically companies fall into two buckets, or organizations fall into two buckets, for-profit or non-profit. How is Mocha Origins an example of evidence that a hybrid model works?
Sure. Well, when we founded Mocha Origins, I wanted it to be a consumer-facing food brand. We wanted to use the product as a way to educate consumers about the challenges as far as the supply chain defectiveness, and we wanted the product sales to be a vehicle, a financial vehicle, to fund our developmental work. And therefore, as sales go up, great, impact goes up. Intrinsically link the two so that our developmental, like, mission impact work isn't just dependent on grants and donations. Could we do that work and link it to a for-profit product line? And I think that that's worked really well, especially this last point. We have made it a point and a commitment to only source ethically grown cocoa. This is cocoa that's paying farmers much more than stock exchange or commodity quality cocoa. So right there, just doing that is giving farmers living wage income, and it's providing us with the ingredient to make our product. So even if we weren't then investing our profits back into Cameroon to develop this really cool cocoa farming school, even without that, we'd be considered a social enterprise because we're sourcing in a way that's environmentally and socially responsible to support farmers in rural communities in Cameroon.
Yeah. So how do you balance profit and mission? And is that balance dynamic or is it static?
At first, for us, it was dynamic, and it's challenging. It's a really good question, and it's important you get clear on it and figure that mechanism to kind of keep that balance in check. For example, it's excited for an entrepreneur or someone that has a lot of mission interest, to overcommit, maybe overfund its development work, while you have to look at financial performance. And so, what we do is measure both. We measure our mission impact and environmental impact and our financial performance. And I think it's really important then, and it kind of, ties back to your last question or your previous question around a diverse team, making sure that you do have the checks and balances and the financial accounting systems in place to measure your good work against your funding capacity so that you don't overextend yourself and run out of fuel before you get healthy revenue cycles going. And I think that we haven't made any tragic mistakes, but I would have loved for a social entrepreneur to warn me of that ahead of time, that your burn rate is going to kick in as soon as you start up, and you want your company to impact these communities long term. So make sure you financially plan to be able to fund your company's success so that it continues on, so that you continue to fund your mission impact work as a social business.
Yeah, I think the point of sustainability is just a great point of advice for Malvern students interested in entrepreneurship. So as a consumer, I've recently seen an uptick in the amount of impact-focused companies. Is having this model advantageous for companies like Mocha and their brands?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. If, for example, the bean-to-bar craft chocolate industry that we're entering, the more makers, the more competitors that can be created, the more, the more of these companies that are out there, are we good? Cool. Yeah, the more purchasing that can happen from farmers who are getting paid ethically. So if we're going to make a dent, it can't be Mocha and the, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 chocolate bars we're making every month. We need an entire industry. We need hundreds of companies like us to all be doing this. And then it's kind of like a great example of economies of scale. Economies of scale in this instance is going to mean we're pushing that needle much further as far as supporting ethically and transparently traded cocoa and coffee and farmers in these communities. And so, I think the awareness that consumers now have is really great. They want to buy from brands that are socially responsible, looking out for the environment, and we love contributing to that market interest.
So describe your relationship with the Cameroonian communities. What did they contribute to your business model?
Everything. Our Cameroon team, I feel like I was born again in Cameroon. I was still in my very early 20s when I went there, and immediately humbled by how happy and successful inside people can be when your conditions are what we would consider underdeveloped. And I think that mindset shift that I had at that moment contributed definitely towards my, next 10 years, but I think towards the rest of my life. And it made me really value what's important, I believe, which is relationships and reciprocity and honesty. And I think that all those qualities are why Mocha Origins is 4 years in and still alive as a startup and going to be successful. From a more practical answer, I think the Cameroonian team has allowed us, they taught us how to see. As a Westerner going in, it's really easy to walk in and be like, well, here's how we do it, and boy, it's working great in America. Let's plug that into play here. And let's use our generosity and lead with our heart, which I think needs to exist, but it needs to be kept in check by local realities, and local leaders and local partners are the way to do that. They can immediately see what you're not seeing and ultimately then teach you how to look. I'll never forget this example when we were working with a rice co-op to grow rice, and farmers needed a more mechanical way to process their rice paddies. And so we were partnering with them to give them access to equipment. And it was working, and they were taking this rice to market and now earning the same amount but putting less time in, so their profit margins were going up. They were finally making a living wage income from rice cultivation. Another not-for-profit based in the U.S. started importing bulk containers of rice, milk, and wheat. Those are three things that farmers can very successfully produce in Cameroon and rely on the sales of to survive. And this entity sourced them from the United States and was importing them in and giving them away because it was their way of doing charity and doing good work. The market for those crops completely flattened out, and thousands of farmers were left without a market to sell their crops. So that's just an example of making sure that you tap local knowledge and involve the locals in doing needs assessment and really creating the way forward for the project.
How has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted Mocha's farmers and people like them?
It's been challenging. It's kind of tough. I mean, one reality is that, for example, in Cameroon, our farm is isolated already. Like, people are already social distancing. Very mountainous region, kind of sparsely populated. I asked my agronomist and team recently, like, how has the need to be socially distanced affected operations? And truthfully, it just hasn't. They're taking precautions, they're wearing masks and keeping distant, but they're already kind of keeping distant anyway. They're on this cocoa farm. But what has been challenging, what's challenged them the most is marketing of the crops. So markets have been shut down, which means, food prices have skyrocketed, except there's no place to really sell that food. So there's been some challenges there as far as the local economy is concerned. And an example is, so Mocha grows bananas and plantains. We had a beautiful 5,000-pound harvest this year, and we were so excited to take that to market, turn that back into capital, and plant more trees. The market, because of the pandemic, became so convoluted to navigate, so expensive to get crops to market, and it was so sparsely attended that the clock was ticking. You harvest a fruit from a tree, you don't have that much time to figure out your market linkage. And so it was so challenging. We ended up donating our entire harvest to a local not-for-profit group there. So it felt really good, but it was very turbulent financially on our farm this year because of that. And that's what a lot of farmers are facing.
And how has COVID-19 affected your farm in Pennsylvania and your company in general?
Yeah, as far as our chocolate and coffee roastery in Pennsylvania, it's been a very volatile year. We kind of have 4 different market channels that we sell in, some have been significantly higher in volume, but some completely disappeared altogether. And that's been really challenging. We have a great team constantly doing reevaluations, rebudgeting, making sure that, we're not overextending ourselves. And the other thing is I like to do a lot of volunteer trips and origin trips. And it's a revenue source. And we take groups and families and students to these communities. We had plenty of trips booked for this year, and it's just not going to happen. So, there's been some volatility in there for sure. And so my point, I think I'll sum it up by saying when you do launch, or if you, are working for a company, diversify your sales. Obviously, be online, pursue wholesale, look at distribution. You might have walk-in retail as well, in-store, but having more than one market channel is really important for volatile times like this.
Yeah, so you now winnow thousands of pounds of coffee beans every month. You're producing thousands of chocolate bars every month, and you're in grocery stores across the country. So how do you see Mocha Origins growing, and how will you continue to balance profit and mission as you do so?
So our growth goal is kind of twofold. One is direct to consumer, and getting people to the website so they can engage with our brand, read about the farmers, our mission, and buy from us there. But the other is wholesale. So finding other retail partners that are, ideologically aligned with our mission and our values. Natural food stores, places like that. And so we have pretty ambitious growth goals over the next few years. And we want to stay small as possible as far as, I guess, our authenticity and integrity as far as our product and mission. But at the same time, businesses need to scale, and you have to scale quick. So your economies of scale kick in, and you start to benefit from having enough volume moving through your manufacturing space to affordably produce your product. And as those volumes pick up, your margins increase. And so our goal is to grow as fast as possible, but keep our mission front and center.
The newly built St. Augustine Center for Social Impact offers courses in social entrepreneurship, as well as hands-on experiences for students to make their own impact. So if you were to design a course in the new St. Augustine Center, just take us through what it would look like.
That's a lofty thought process. I love it. I think one of the most valuable things for me has been to have opportunities to meet with others who are already doing it. You just skip so many pain points and growing pains, rather. And so, in that program, building in an opportunity to really meet with people from, a variety of disciplines and business sectors, and to hear from them. How did you set up your shop? Let's talk about workflow and the life cycle of the product and how things should move, how things should be set up. The other thing is, as far as social entrepreneurship is concerned, finding people that can speak to how to balance your product and company growth with your mission and impact growth. And that could be it could be a model like, making shoes, and every pair that you sell, we're going to give a pair. You should know, can you really afford to give that pair? And when in your company's existence can you afford to give that pair? Or another example is, maybe we're going to make chocolate bars and we're going to pay more for beans. Well, great. That's a great idea. Make sure you do proper cost analysis to see what is that upper limit. What can you really afford to pay for beans? And at what quantity of sales do you need to be at to where you can afford that? And so I think financial modeling for the product manufacturing, and then also tying into your budget the factors of your mission and social work. It's really important to link those two from day one.
Yeah, well, Jeff, thank you so much for talking with me. We're now going to open it up to questions from our audience, moderated by Subhan Sharma.
Hey, Sumant, awesome.
Our first question comes from Brennan Offshack, and it pertains to your time on the FedEx Entrepreneur Advisory Board. And he wants to know, what was your most memorable moment in helping someone out when on that board?
So, I think on that board, one of my greatest takeaways as far as moments was to, and this came from FedEx and their willingness to listen, but it was when talking about our shipping costs and how shipping costs are such a tangible cost of our business and our sale, and so yeah, I was really actually talking to FedEx directly. It was the executives of the FedEx management team over the course of many sessions talking about how when you're shipping a $8 chocolate bar, if your freight or your shipping cost is, let's say, $8, and you got to put a $1 ice pack and an insulator and an exterior box, our shipping logistics cost is double the cost of our good. Can you help us solve that problem? And so, it was actually talking to experts in the industry and not being fearful or timid to say, it just doesn't work. Your costs are too high. And when small businesses make up the majority of revenue in the United States, it's important that they listen to these questions and focus in on them. And most of them do want to hear. So, so I think that moment on the FedEx Entrepreneurial Board was when I felt confident enough to express the dissatisfaction and the challenges we face with our shipping costs. And I was so amazed on how willing they were to listen and actually to address and change those problems for us.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Daniel Balmer, and he wants to know, how would a Malvern student reach out to a small business like yours if they wanted to work with them on a project or just know more about their process?
Anytime. And, I think owners, especially of small businesses, are always excited when an email comes in. So, whether it's me at Mocha or any small business that you follow and you're kind of passionate around their model or maybe their product, reach out to them. It's amazing how on a website and the print material, how big a company can look. And maybe they are big. Maybe their revenues are solid and they're established, but there's a human being behind it, and most of them are really eager to hear the excitement and kind of share that excitement back. So, reach out to companies that you're passionate about, that are doing good work, that you want to ask questions to. I get emails and questions all the time. People call, people text, email. How do you do this? And more often than not, willing to share pretty much anything that we have of value to offer. So stick your neck out and ask questions.
Yeah, got it. Our next question comes from Aiden Carroll, and he wants to know, is there a challenge in having your farms in Cameroon and your factories in the United States?
Absolutely. Huge challenge. It's, our chocolate line is made up of, that's a great question, and I love that you, what was the person's name?
Aiden Carroll.
Aiden, I love that you put that together. The logistical challenges are huge. So, our chocolate line is made up of about 5 different origins from 5 different countries around Africa. And, we'll take Tanzania, for example. It's like close to the other side of the globe. And so costs are really high. We can't afford to get a bag of cocoa over. We have to partner with companies already bringing containers of cocoa over. So logistics are not everything, but a big part of your business's success. And as far as that goes, it's challenging. So, there's some companies out there who are actually making their chocolate at origin, meaning in Africa, for example. There's challenges with that too. We thought about pouring and making our chocolate bars in Cameroon, which, by the way, melt at 80-something degrees. So it's kind of like there's going to be challenges with any supply chain, and you have to pick where do you want those challenges to exist, and at which location are you better equipped to address those challenges. And for us, it was manufacturing in Pennsylvania, sourcing from Africa.
Yeah, on that same note of logistics, our next question comes from Ivy Morin, and she asks about your manufacturing process. You said you had to make your own machine at one point. How big of a roadblock was that, and how did you guys manage to come up with the machine?
it was a big roadblock, but there's so much excitement when you launch that like you can overcome anything, right? And so I wish you could see a picture of this, but imagine a microwave-sized coffee roaster. I started roasting in my shed, and the coffee was so fresh and really good. We were doing half-pound batches of coffee, like a coffee bag's worth of coffee at a time, and we quickly realized, like, oh no, we need a bigger shed. Like, this is good stuff. You know, we have customers here, and so how to go from that microwave roaster to a real coffee roaster, how to afford that, and how to feel comfortable taking that risk. So kind of two parts to it. One is picking the smallest scale equipment that you can find and then growing into bigger once your cash flow can justify it. And then the other is, making your own. Huge roadblock. I had a mechanical engineer who travels with me. We actually do a lot of solar projects, train electricians, and dig deep water wells. So I was blessed to have a friend who is brilliant and was able to determine that the cocoa bean, when you crack it open, the husk is really light and the cocoa nib is really heavy. So let's use airflow as a way to discriminate and separate those two substances. The cocoa shells blow away into a catch, which we make into a tea, and the cocoa nibs fall to the bottom, which we turn into chocolate. So I think just asking a lot of questions, the sky's the limit. And if you've thought of it, it probably has happened, or someone also was thinking about it. Yeah, so start searching, and look for solutions out there. And it's a big roadblock, but it's probably one of the funnest parts of our job, which is identifying bottlenecks, fixing them. And you never really fix them, actually. You kind of just move the bottleneck to another point in the supply chain. And so bring excitement to your job and know that creativity needs to be there to overcome those challenges. And just enjoy it.
That's pretty incredible. So our fourth question comes from Anthony Purdy, and he asks, how did you choose the farmers that you guys currently work with?
So in Cameroon, really quite easy. A lot of them are my friends, neighbors on our farm, and it was fun discussing the price points with these farmers. It wasn't a transactional relationship like, well, you're gonna sell me your beans for what, $2. It was a discussion. It was a human discussion. It was, well, what is the living wage income that you need to survive? Let's start with that. So you don't need to sell cocoa and have like a bunch of other side hustles to earn income. What if you as a cocoa farmer could actually be a sustainable and profitable cocoa farmer? And so we chose our farmers in Cameroon because they were already part of our network. As far as Tanzania, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Ghana, we have found partners who have specialized in working with co-ops that are fair trade and paying living wage income to farmers. And so just a lot of networking, a lot of travel, and a lot of getting to know people. There's like just a human discussion around every single part of our business. And it wasn't like going to the cocoa auction and bidding on a container of cocoa. Nope, it's finding someone who's working with a co-op and, hey, they have these great beans and they're going to bring in a container of them, and do you want to partner and make 10,000 bars with them? And so it's just getting to know people and becoming like a master networker. Networking.
On that topic of networking, I understand that the entrepreneurial process comes with a lot of negotiations and whatnot. So our next question from Matt Hess asks about negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
And when in negotiations, what strategies do you find to be the most successful?
Yeah, I think two things: honesty and clarity. So first of all, clarity. Being clear on like what you can and can't afford. There's going to be a top line to what you can't pay, anymore for to make your product profitably. So knowing that, like having that, and then honesty as well. So sitting down with someone who's maybe 5 times your size as far as supply capacity, and saying, hey, we're a startup, and we only need 5,000 boxes for our products every year, and I know you don't do less than 50,000. But here's where we're coming from. And if we can achieve getting 5,000 at that unit cost, here's what's going to happen. We're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z as far as our mission, and we're going to then be able to get our economics in check, get more sales, and grow to 50,000, and you're going to be our supplier. And so we've had a lot of just really open discussions with people, like, we can't pay more than this, but we can promise you a really transparent relationship for years to come. And I've just found that just kind of just being a human and open and honest and clear has gotten us a long way.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Tyler Brecker, and it pertains to fair trade coffee industry. So how does your company differ from that of fair trade, and what are the pros and cons to either approach, in your opinion?
I wish I had a stopwatch. This is a really passion subject for me. I wonder how much time we have. So great question. Fair trade is an incredible certification, and the principles around it are amazing. It's basically a floor price that's fixed so that farmers can't earn less than that, and that price is created based off of, well, should be based off of what farmers need to earn a living from. I actually think it should be more. And so we source a lot of fair trade certified coffees and cocoa beans. But we don't limit our sourcing to whether or not a coffee farmer is fair trade certified. And here's why. We work with beans that, for example, come from smallholder farms in Africa. And let's talk about Cameroon. And so one farmer who might be a little bit more wealthy, well established, a bigger farm, bigger revenues, has a greater chance of becoming a fair trade certified farm or co-op. And therefore, when he achieves that, people are going to be really interested in buying from him, and they're going to do that, and he's going to get his product to market. Well, I've also worked with, 300 farmers who each grow smaller quantities that total the same amount as that one farmer. And they couldn't together get that certification. There's a ton of challenges and compliance requirements to do that, and costs, to be quite frank. And they're not paying any less for their beans. They're not getting paid any less than the other guy for their beans. And so what we try to practice is called direct trade. Fair trade is great in principle, and it's a great compass to kind of use to gauge. But direct trade, if you can find a transparent partner who's sourcing and they can give you transparency reports, here's what farmers were paid. In some instances, our farmers are getting paid 20 to 50%, or our Cameroon bean, like I mentioned, 330% more than the fair trade price. So we don't limit ourselves to fair trade certifications. We definitely value the practices in place and believe in kind of the mission of fair trade. But I do think we need you to think of some solutions to the problems that still do exist with this certification. It's not perfect yet.
Got it.
Yeah.
This question comes from Caden Rogers, and he asks, what do you think it'll take for consumers to fully hop on board the social impact-based consumption trend?
Yeah, learning how to see and being compassionate. For me, it took travel. I just needed to travel to Cameroon once to realize, wow, we are on an unhealthy path as far as cocoa and coffee consumption is concerned, as far as the financial structure within that supply chain. And that moment, Cole mentioned the citizen moment. It was the moment when I learned how to look and see, and then the compassion that I knew I had, but it had some framework, some context. My compassion kind of started to get smarter and enrobed in some wisdom. And so I think for consumers to get on that trend, first of all, I hope it doesn't really become a trend, or everyone's going to do it for the sake of capitalism. And I think that I hope that it's small brands staying authentic and that there's true mission behind the product and their claims. And so I think for consumers to be drawn towards it, they just need to keep their eyes open and keep seeing the world that we live in and the challenges that exist. I mean, especially here in our country and in every country, as you travel the world, you'll see that it's not a perfect picture yet. And I boldly believe that if we could improve the supply chain economics so that, we'll take agriculture for an example here, so that the commodity price actually paid farmers based off of what they need to earn a living wage income versus a stock exchange price, we could make a huge dent in poverty in farms throughout Africa. And it took me to travel and witness that firsthand to really understand that.
All right, so this next question comes from Mr. Patrick Sillop, and he asks, what are some books or podcasts that you recommend or listen to for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Mr. Patrick, great question. Okay, podcast. Meant to Be Eaten is an awesome podcast for conscious consumers. It's based in Brooklyn. It's a podcast you should check out for sure. Meant to Be Eaten, and it covers food brands that embrace social entrepreneurship into their business model and supply chains, and seek to do two things: create high quality, and increase reciprocity along that supply chain. Some books that I've read recently that like everyone should read. Okay, Cocoa by Christy Leslie. It's a blue book, spoonful of cocoa on the cover. I can just see it. Everyone should read it. You could almost apply it to any commodity, but this one's specifically about cocoa, as the title implies. But she's a professor based in Ghana. So Cocoa is a really good book, and as you read it, you can imagine how the defective supply chain that exists for cocoa probably has relevance in other supply chains across many different commodities. Cocoa is a great book to read, as it talks about international business and global economics, or agronomics, and Meant to Be Eaten is a really great awakened consumer podcast that I'd love to have you guys listen to.
Yep. Our next question comes from Billy Mullray, and he asks, are there any sacrifices to be made when sizing up your business?
Good question, Billy. So we're, I think, in phase 2. We've kind of had Chocolate Factory 1, tabletop, 2 of us, 18-hour days, a lot of hand work. The chocolate was good. Then we scaled up. Now we have machines that are able to do, several hundred times more capacity. We're still considered very small. My operations manager and I were just kind of doing some assessment. A lot of the commodity cocoa you can do in 1 hour what we are actually now doing in a year. And so when I look and reflect back to the scale up that we've had, and actually we're on the cusp of having another, our chocolate's gotten better. We've actually scaled up, and we can afford bigger equipment that can do the job better. We're learning as we're going, so we're getting better at what we're doing. We're understanding the science and the specifics to the craft. And then quality of life has gone up too. We're able to load machines that can then produce 500 bars worth of chocolate, which in the same amount of time on our previous machines could make, it was like 30 bars of chocolate. And the machines kept breaking. So, as we scaled up so far, haven't seen any. I think the question was, has the quality been jeopardized? Not yet. And in fact, economies of scale have gone up. Life has gotten actually better, and I think product quality has gotten better as well. And we're doing bean-to-bar chocolate, so everything is in-house, and it will be in-house for the existence of our company, where we're monitoring from the roast to the winnow to the grinding to the chocolate making. So as long as we can keep our eyes on every part of the process and nitpick each step, I don't really see scaling up being a detriment to our quality.
Got it. Thank you. So that was our last question for today. So now we'll cut over to Cole Sharian for a brief outro.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for participating in the second event of the Citizen Speaker Series, featuring speaker Jeff Abella. Jeff, it was awesome to have you here tonight to share your story and your citizen moment. For our audience, so be on the lookout for our Spring 2021 speaker lineup, which will be announced soon on our Instagram. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be hard to follow up this lineup, but I think we got it. And then also on Instagram, you'll soon find our new podcast, My Citizen Moment, which, like Jeff was talking about, profiles students having their own impact here on campus. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, Jeff, for coming. And I hope tonight that we inspired you to find your citizen moment. Thank you.